Hello again. This is Eben reporting from my basement, making campaign signs for my own campaign for Maine State Senate. And rather than go door to door, I would like to hear from you if you are willing to make contact through my website at ebenrose.com. You can send me an email and have this a little bit more of a two-way dialogue. But for now, I'm just posting a series of videos to discuss some of the weighty issues of our time and some of the time that we have in our basements or in our homes, respectfully acknowledging the lockdown situation that we're in, the national crisis that we're in, and with our thoughts, especially our hopes and expectations, maybe fears about the future when we emerge from this. This little series of videos will be unpacking some of this and discussing some of the philosophical aspects of it to get our minds better prepared for what kind of things we can do as a government, even as a state government, to really make the world we want. So, let's get started. So I thought I would talk today about home economics. It seems like maybe an odd thing, maybe not such an odd thing to bring up. We are at home after all, and we're thinking about budgets, and we're thinking about how to run a household, how not to go crazy at home. So the home economics that I'm referring to is not how to beat an egg or set a table. It is about how to sustain ourselves, for one thing, how to live sustainably, and what we expect to sustain us in our host food. So many of you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Some of you have had psychology backgrounds and the like. Might remember that it's a pyramid, or a triangle, I should say, a little pyramid, like a food pyramid of needs. And at the bottom of the pyramid is our physiological needs, like food, water, and shelter, the sort of basic stuff, right? Above that is sort of a sense of security and safety. Don't get eaten by the big saber-toothed cat, for one thing, and know you're not going to get flooded out in the spring, and have some sense of a future. So safety and security, these are all pretty basic things. On up is having good relationships, belonging to a societal group, belonging to a family, being affirmed in that way. And further up is having some sense of self-esteem. So feeling accomplished, feeling like you've done something worthy of your time here on earth. And at the very top is self-actualization. So this is classic Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Self-actualization is where you realize your fullest creative potential, like making signs or making videos, and having the time to do that. So that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So let's start there and spend a little bit of time on that as an economic goal. Shall we? Okay, let's go. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is one approach to getting around the concept or getting at the concept of utility, which is very central to the marginal utility theory, which is the prevailing dominant orthodoxy in economics. So this term utility is a really key thing. And so, one way to look at utility is to look in terms of needs and wants. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs gets at utility to a great extent. Where Maslow's hierarchy of needs was developed by Abraham Maslow, who was a psychologist, mostly focusing on psychology, there are sort of equivalents to this in economic circles. Most notably, I have a personal fondness for a Chilean economist named Manfred Maxneef. He developed and expanded on Maslow's hierarchy of needs and developed a sort of matrix of sorts of 4 columns and a stack of individual needs. So not making it a hierarchy, but recognizing that we need all of these things in our lives. And in order to get all of these things, there are certain actions, or to express all of these things, there are certain actions, certain settings, and certain requirements in order to meet them. So it's more of an economic concern focused on utility and happiness than it is about a hierarchy, needing something at the base before you get to the top. Manfred Maxneef spent most of his early career in rural and poor parts of Central and South America, and he realized that people there aren't really concerned about GDP and about productivity, and all of these things that seem to obsess the world in terms of economics. I mean, all of these ideas about shared prosperity and so forth never actually make it to these people who are concerned about raising their families, who are concerned about meals that they get every day, about making sure the rain doesn't soak them in their houses. These are all very practical concerns that keep them busy, and concerns that keep them very smart. You have to be very astute and a very hard worker in order to live in those conditions and to eke out from life joy. So he realized that most of this talk about economic prosperity has nothing to do with them, and that's most of the world. So he encapsulated this in his book, The Barefoot Economist. And I think some of his important lessons that come from this are about creating a very practical and pragmatic sense of economics and who and what it serves. Manfred Maxneef tells a story of a relief organization, I think it was the Peace Corps, that came to an area of the Andes, an Andean village. And there was a woman there who built porches. And they had this great thing that they were going to bring her, with some kind of jig or mechanism that could help her make more porches, make more productivity. She made about a porch every week. And so they set her up with this particular machine, some kind of lathe or something like that, showed her how to use it, and then came back a couple of years later to check up on how much more productivity she gained from this machine. And they asked her, well, how's this machine? She said, oh, it's great, it's wonderful. And they said, well, how many more porches do you make? You should be able to make, 10 a week, or at least 5 a week. She says, oh, I only make 1 a week. And they're like, well, what's wrong with the machine? How come you're not, making more porches? She goes, no, it's great. I get to spend more time with my family now. I get to make 1 porch a day, and then I have the rest of the time for the more important things. That's a really, really important lesson for our post-pandemic economy that we will hopefully build and start building through conceptualizing it now. So Manfred Maxneef has a list of 9 fundamental or basic human needs. These consist of subsistence, which is like food, water, and shelter, that sort of thing. Protection, which is a sense of security, like your social safety net, which I should say is being really very much challenged right now with our COVID pandemic. We don't really have, it turns out, a very good social safety net in this country. So that'll be a main topic of discussion in this country, I hope, for the upcoming election, presidential election and beyond. On down the list, affection. So this would be sort of, senses of human respect, of a sense of humor, sensuality, all of these things. People need these as well. Understanding as a fundamental human need. So this would include curiosity and critical thinking. This is an important part of our educational system. Participation is really important. People want to feel like they belong to something. This is why we have such an obsession with spectator sports, and you're a Green Bay Packers fan. Oh, no, you're a Patriots fan, etc., etc. You want to belong to a group. So there's certain ways and maybe better ways to express this than other ways. So participation. Leisure is another one. I'll be speaking to leisure more during one of these videos. But obviously you want to party, you want to relax, you want to be able to have some peace of mind, take a walk in the woods, this sort of thing, leisure. Creation, like sign painting or invention or problem solving. These are all parts of creation. This is a fundamental human need. Also identity, so feeling like you belong to a certain group, and this is wound up in language, in our customs, in our shared values. When we talk about, our main values and that sort of thing, or American values, I mean, that's sort of the identity. And of course, there's identity politics, where you want to identify with a certain group because of your sexual orientation or because of your ethnicity and so forth. And the last one is freedom. Freedom is an expression of your autonomy and your passion. Also, part of freedom is having equality in rights, having equal access to all of the liberties that we enjoy as a free people in the world. So this is sort of the hierarchy, or not the hierarchy, but the matrix of Manfred Maxneef. I encourage you to look up Manfred Maxneef's Fundamental Human Needs, and you can find in detail how this is an expansion, an important and I think very useful expansion of Maslow's hierarchy. I would encourage anyone who's seeing these videos to look up Manfred Maxneef and particularly look up a Democracy Now! Interview from 2012. Maybe a little bit dated as we've aged so much in the past couple of weeks and past couple of years that it's hard to imagine what the world was like pre-Trump and soon to be pre-COVID-19. But his interview with Amy Goodwin on Democracy Now! Is, I think, very helpful. Another helpful thing, an important takeaway from Manfred Maxneef is his use of satisfiers. So if you have these different needs, these utilities, fundamental human needs, the 9 that I had mentioned, subsistence, protection, affection, understanding, participation, leisure, creation, identity, and freedom, then there's ways that these can be satisfied. And he has a list of sort of some qualifying factors on these satisfiers. So he has violators, for example, of these satisfiers. So violators are things that are intended to, or at least promoted as satisfying a need. Like Coke, for example, is supposed to quench your thirst, be really thirst quenching. Now, I admit I have a weak spot for Coke. I do like on a hot sunny day a Coke, but just one and that's enough, and it gets to be shockingly sweet. The thing about Coke is it does have a lot of sugar in it and a lot of caffeine, and both of these things tend to be diuretics. So you end up losing a lot of water, even though the idea is they're supposed to be thirst quenching. So that's actually a violator. It's supposed to do one thing, but it kind of leaves you in the opposite sense. So a violator of a satisfier is one category. Another one of these categories or types of satisfiers is what Maxneef calls a pseudo-satisfier. So an example of this would be status symbols, something like a Rolex watch. I am told Rolexes are, just great watches, and, I've also been told that they don't keep as good a time as a good quartz Timex. But, why does anyone need a Rolex? You have a smartphone. It's not about time, keeping time. It's purely a status symbol. And yet people pay, ungodly sums for Rolex watches. So if the goal here is to make you feel, I guess, important, feel this sense of belonging, remember this Maxneefian matrix, if it's about participating in a group, if it's about identity, that you belong to some elite class, this watch will be limited on what it can provide, because there is so much more to giving you identity, so much more to fulfilling this sense of belonging than this watch. And it may be that if you're in the Wall Street set, you have to have this watch in order to feel like you belong to this elite club. It's one of the status symbols, an important indicator that you belong to that elite equestrian class. But really, how many of these watches can you have? I mean, that's not going to fill the gap. There's so much more than that needs to fill that. So it's kind of a pseudo-satisfier. It sort of gets to the identity part, but just the Rolex watch alone won't get you there. So it doesn't really fill that yearning. It's a pseudo-satisfier, a false satisfier. Another one of Maxneef's categories of satisfiers is an inhibiting satisfier. An inhibiting satisfier is something that is intended initially to really satisfy one of these needs, but in so doing it inhibits other needs, or may even inhibit the need that it's trying to satisfy itself. So an example that he gives is, say, a family that is concerned about protection. Remember, this is the second in the list of 9 fundamental human needs in Maxneef's matrix. So protection may be an important quality that a family wants to bestow, but in so bestowing this protection, it becomes overprotective. And in being overprotective, it inhibits other ways that this person can become fully human by realizing these fundamental human needs. So an overprotective family will, for example, quash dissenting views or to some degree critical thinking. It may quash one's sense of identity. We know families that can love their child so much that they don't want him or her to be, exposed to all the bad stuff in the world, but then that impinges on that person's freedom, which is another fundamental human need. So these can be inhibiting satisfiers. They may possibly satisfy the thing that's intended to satisfy, but in so doing quash other needs. Another one of Maxneef's satisfiers is the singular satisfier. At least this is a satisfier. A singular satisfier, sort of self-explanatory, is something that simply satisfies one of these needs, or one part of one of these needs, but doesn't necessarily interfere with anything else. So an example would be food stamps. Food stamps provide, obviously, food, or some limited types of food, and that's it. They don't provide health care. They don't provide a sense of love or belonging or affection or any of these. They don't necessarily inhibit them. They just don't really have anything to do with them. So that's a singular satisfier. And I think that much conventional economics is focused on the satisfaction of one single need, a very narrowly defined need. One thing I always laugh at is the trend in businesses to have solutions. I saw something the other day that was like door solutions. It's like, well, what was the door problem in the first place? And, with a chemistry background, I always think of things suspended in water, So is it a door solution, or is it a door suspension? Or is it, does it precipitate out? Do doors precipitate out of solution? Anyway, you get my point. So that's a singular satisfier, is something that is trying to narrowly focus something and then just satisfies that alone. The last one in Manfred Maxneef's set of satisfiers is the synergistic satisfier. And this is the one we want. This is the one we want to build an economy out of. And if you are a firm offering a service, hopefully this is the thing that you can offer, something that ultimately helps people in multiple ways, besides just one. And your firm should probably do more than just focus on satisfying one specific need, but also focus on its role within a society, and therefore through various actions that a company, a B corporation, say would do. It is helping employees, it is helping the community develop some of its other human potential through meeting some of these human needs, or contributing to satisfying some of these other human needs synergistically with the main goal of providing whatever good or service it is that you provide. The example that Maxneef uses is breastfeeding. That breastfeeding obviously provides food for the infant, but it also provides, in the infant human needs, that sense of belonging, that sense of comfort, that sense of leisure. So many of these things are an immunity. So many of these things are satisfied through the one act of breastfeeding. And this is where Nestle is way off base in its efforts to try and get people off of onto formula as opposed to breastfeeding. So those are the satisfiers. There's violators, there's pseudo-satisfiers, there's inhibiting satisfiers, there's singular satisfiers, and there's synergistic satisfiers. So I would like to see a world, an economy, where we start thinking about these things, and you at home can start thinking about your own purchases and own needs as part of the home economy concept here. Think about what you consume, and think about whether it's a violator, a pseudo-satisfier, an inhibiting satisfier, a singular satisfier, or a synergistic satisfier. So go for the synergistic if you can. So the upshot and the take-home lesson here is that any talk, even at the state level, of economics, economic development in particular, should probably be focused on something more practical and grounded than these vague terms like productivity or prosperity, or even just the word economic. Oh, this is not economic. These usually mean something different. These usually mean it makes money for one firm or for a couple of firms, for an interest group. And it's not clear if this money does anything to help human fundamental needs. So fundamental human needs is where we should start in economics. because that's what the ultimate goal is happiness, make people happy in the world. So thank you for watching. Once again, my name is Eben Rose. I'm running for state senate. Please visit my website at ebenrose.com. I'm a clean elections candidate, and if you are so inclined, you can make a $5 contribution to that clean elections candidacy to help the production of these videos and help get this message out. So thank you for watching. Stay safe now, everyone. Bye-bye.